this year, I was living on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, Israel. I was there studying Middle Eastern culture as part of the BYU Jerusalem Center program, an institution I'm sure many of you are familiar with. While I was there, I had the opportunity to see many religious sites that were of significance to me, such as the Garden Tomb, the Dome of the Rock, and the Garden of Gethsemane. But while I was there, I also saw lots of religious and political conflict. I saw airstrikes, riots, and even a terrorist stabbing. But by far the most sobering thing I saw was the West Bank Wall. Now, as I mentioned, I lived on the Mount of Olives. A quarter of a mile away in one direction was the city of Jerusalem, the place where Jesus Christ himself walked and taught. A quarter mile away in the other direction was this wall. The Israelis call it the Homat HaHafrada, and you'll excuse my pronunciation, I don't speak Hebrew. But it means a separation wall against terrorism. The Palestinians call it the Apartheid, which means racial segregation wall. In short, it is the reason that Israel will find no peace anytime soon. Now, some of you may be wondering what the West Bank even is. The West Bank refers to the West Bank of the Dead Sea in Israel. After the Holocaust, millions upon millions of Jews fled into the Holy Land. They had been promised it by Jehovah in ancient times. The problem was that this land wasn't just empty for the taking. Palestinians, many of whose families had been living in the Holy Land for millennia, were already occupying the holy cities, namely Jerusalem. Tension broke out when a man named David Ben-Gurion, an Israeli Jew, declared that Israel was now its own country, but the Palestinians had to get out. That was 1948. In the 70 years since that time, Israel has seen 3 major wars and near constant conflict. In the 108 days I spent in Israel, I saw just a little taste of that decades-old grudge. But as I said, the most sobering thing I saw was this wall. Why is that? This wall is the physical barrier that quarantines Palestinians away from Israelis. It is 440 miles long, 28 feet high, and is topped with barbed wire. In many places, it is a series of 3 walls, because just one wall is not enough. It was built in 1994, a lifetime ago for many of us. That means that a whole generation of Israelis have grown up only seeing the wall, but no one who lies behind it. And that Palestinians have grown up only seeing the Israeli defense soldiers and knowing the hardship that they have caused. Now, I have to admit that while I was in Jerusalem, I saw a little bit of that petty nature of the wall. Israelis have decided to take away Palestinian government IDs. This may not seem like a big deal, but without a government ID, you can't ride a plane, cross borders, work outside the West Bank, or even have a driver's license. This wasn't fair of the Israelis. But Palestinians decided to retaliate by executing things like suicide bombings, riots, and other acts of terrorism. This wasn't right of them either. So who should we give our sympathy to? While I was in Israel, I spoke to this woman, Bana Husseini. She's a Palestinian woman from the West Bank. She works closely with the United Nations and other Peace Corps groups to bring aid to those affected by the conflict. She has lived on both sides of the wall and has seen the devastation that it has caused in both groups. She had a little bit to say, and I'm wondering if I can get a volunteer to read for me. Anyone brave? Thank you.
This conflict was born from passion about a homeland, but people let their passions get out of hand. They've isolated themselves, and that has been their destruction. It's fear from the unknown for not knowing the other side. This wall is not protecting Israel, it's just separating people.
How true is that? And I'm not here to make you think that one side is right and the other is wrong. In fact, I think that both sides have been on the wrong a time or two. And I'm certainly not here to say that one side deserves our sympathy more than the other. You all have your agency to decide that. But in all my thinking about this wall that was in my backyard, I started to think about other walls around the world. There were walls in the ancient Roman Empire, the Great Wall of China, and even the Berlin Wall. And I have to admit, in all that soul searching, I became a little bit self-righteous because I don't support any of those walls. I don't support what they stand for. I think that they are a way to stop communication and a way for empires to flaunt their political power. I was feeling pretty good about my superior moral compass. But ladies and gentlemen, my name is Maddy Quast, and I'm a hypocrite. You wanna know why? Because I have built walls of my own. I'm not talking about walls of brick or mortar. I'm talking about emotional and social walls. And I think, no offense, that everyone in this room has built walls of their own. Now, I don't think that we do it maliciously. I think it just happens. It starts when a biology major says the comm major is easy and you get a little defensive. It continues when you deny someone a job because their accent's just a little too hard for you to understand on a day-to-day basis. It continues again when we look at our teachers as these unknowable authority enemy figures instead of real human beings with real problems. It continues again when we look at people who are younger than us or who haven't attended college and think that they just can't understand the world the same way we do because they just haven't experienced enough of it. How many of you are guilty of this? I know that I am. So after I nursed my broken ego a little bit, I decided to make an action plan, and I'll return to that metaphor of walls. I want us to build bridges instead of walls. Now that seems really easy in theory, but in fact it can be very difficult because the only way to connect with someone with whom you've built a wall is to step out of your own shoes and into theirs. I can promise you that it is uncomfortable and it is very awkward, but I can also promise you that it is oh so worth it. Now, as I mentioned, I made that action plan while I was in Jerusalem, so I decided to enact it right then and there. I hit the streets of Jerusalem talking to random strangers on the sidewalk. The people I stopped probably didn't believe the same things I did. They probably didn't even speak the same language. But I learned an awful lot about the human experience and how beautiful life can be. I walked away with a soul that was changed. And because this is a TED Talk, you're supposed to walk away with something that is real and tangible just the same way I did. So I'm going to force my action plan upon you. I want you to take the next 60 seconds and turn to someone different than the people you came with. And I want you to learn their name and something beautiful about them, something that makes them unique. Ready? Go. For indulging me. I hope that this gave you a little perspective of what it could be like to step out of your shoes into someone else's. I return again to the words of Bana Husseini. She's the woman from whom we read the first quote. And I've changed just one word of her words, and I'm hoping that I can have another kind volunteer who would be willing to read for me. Anyone want to volunteer? Thank you.
This conflict was born from passion about a homeland, where people let their passions get out of hand. They've isolated themselves, and that has been their destruction. It's fear from the unknown for not knowing the other side. This wall is not protecting you. It's just separating people.
Feels a bit more personal, doesn't it? Hits you right here. I know that I've been guilty of this. I think that I can't understand that other side. But as I just illustrated, you can. And all you have to do is open your mouth. Bana Husseini had one more thing to say, and I promise it's a short one, so if I can have another volunteer. Thanks.
You have to see each other as people, first and foremost. The only solution to conflict is to come together and begin to understand each other.
Can you imagine how beautiful our world would be if we all behaved that way? How many wars we could have avoided? How many neighbors we would know? Could we have avoided this? Can you imagine how much love there would be in the world if we just understood each other? So build your bridges. Put that blood, sweat, and tears and those awkward conversations into your life. Encourage your friends and family to do the same. It's a small gesture, but a powerful one. And it starts with you. Thank you.